All right, I promise that I am not coming to you live from a jail cell. I actually just landed at SFO, and in the interest of efficiency and in the interest of giving you prompt, timely 49ers updates and 49ers content, I have found a room in the United Club, and I've got a nifty little camera that automatically follows me left and right. Now, if I face a little too far this way, then it does look like I'm in a jail cell, but I made sure that you could see through the glass there just slightly so that uh, I beat the allegations so people don't think that I'm imprisoned right now as I'm talking about the 49ers. Trent Williams, more attention needs to be brought to the fact that he was heroic to even play in this game against the Philadelphia Eagles. But by extension, uh, he still isn't healthy entering this game against the Seattle Seahawks. Trent allowed 6 pressures against Philadelphia. That was tied for his season high. He also wasn't fully healthy when he allowed 6 pressures in week 1 against the Seahawks. The 49ers challenge as an offense and offensive line only grows this week against Seattle. So it's time to shout out to Trent Williams for setting a standard on this 49ers team of finding a way to play just 2 weeks after pulling his hamstring. That was the first time he ever pulled his hamstring in his entire life. He's 37 years old and he weighs 320 pounds. So it's a little bit more difficult for somebody at his weight to work through an injury that sidelines most guys at least 4 weeks. He risked re-injury to get back out there for the 49ers. It doesn't appear that he re-injured himself, but I think that it's very, very important to acknowledge what Trent Williams sacrificed and what he risked to be out there for his 49ers team in the wild card round. You know, Christian McCaffrey so eloquently is able to talk about some of this stuff, and he actually shouted out to Trent Williams in his post-game news conference.
Again, man, when you got a guy who's in year 45 going out here and doing everything he can to come play in this game, and the speeches he gives, the energy he brings to our team, there's no excuse. I mean, it's he did everything under the sun to come back and play in this game, and did. And so again, I hate saying it, but it's not shocking. That's who he is, and that's who this team is.
So Christian, funny guy, right? Year 45 for Trent Williams. It's actually about a third of that. It's year 16 for Trent Williams. That's still a lot of time in the NFL. It's a lot of time to go without a hamstring pull, especially given his style of play, given how athletic he is. I mean, this is arguably the greatest left tackle of all time. And the reason that he's been able to elevate to those heights is because he brings a size, speed, athleticism combination that we quite literally have never seen before, had never seen before in the NFL. So, the respect that Trent Williams was able to garner over the years from the 49ers. He joined this team in 2020. Remember the steal of a trade that San Francisco was able to make with the Washington Redskins at the time. When did they change to the Commanders? Around that time. Oh, maybe they were the Washington football team already at the time in 2020. But the imprint that Trent Williams has had on the locker room over the half decade that he's been with San Francisco has been massive. I was able to immediately talk to him when I walked into that locker room after the game on Sunday, and the look in Trent's eyes. I've talked about this already on a couple of our lives following the game. He is the emotional rudder of this team, and he's also like the emotional weather vane of this team. So you can talk to Trent and you could understand where the 49ers are very quickly because he is such a leadership fixture in that locker room. And he had that look of relief, calm, and intensity all combined into one. I mean, it's a lot of this is a paradox for the 49ers. Like the fact that they're here at 13 wins, despite all that they've encountered, doesn't make sense. And then some of the emotions that the 49ers were feeling on the sideline during the game against the Eagles as they were trying to preserve the victory, that the offense, as it was watching the defense, that I've talked about it, there was this calm, yet obviously it was a situation of anxiety, at least one that should produce those kind of feelings. But it produced a different kind of calm vibe that I think really, really is emblematic of where the 49ers have been as a football team, to hell and back this season. And Trent, he explained that this was so good. I mean, not only did he play in this game through the hamstring injury, putting his hamstring at greater risk, but delivering for the 49ers, at least spiritually, even if his play wasn't at the top of his game with those 6 pressures. But not only did he play, but he also gave the 49ers a historical reference point that I think was very, very important to invoke in this game. And remember back in week 6 against Tampa Bay, when Fred Warner went down with the dislocated ankle, or it was a dislocated and a fractured ankle, a gruesome injury for Fred Warner. San Francisco fell apart in that game. They eventually adapted to the loss of Fred Warner, but not until the next week when they played Atlanta. They eventually stabilized, and obviously the defense has been nowhere near as good as it was back when both Nick Bosa and Fred Warner was playing. But as a football team, emotionally, they eventually stabilized, but they couldn't do it in the moment. Now, you can afford to lose a week 6 game against Tampa Bay. It's not going to make or break your season. When George Kittle went down on Sunday, this wasn't a week 6 game in Tampa Bay. This was a do or die playoff game in Philadelphia. And I mean, considering everything the 49ers had already faced, one could easily assume that losing George Kittle on top of all that relatively early first half of that playoff game against Philadelphia, one could easily assume that the 49ers would respond similarly as they did back in week 6, and they would fold. They're playing a better opponent than the Bucs. They had less firepower now to turn to than they did against Tampa Bay back in week 6. If it already tripped them up once, I think that logic tells you that it probably was going to trip them up again. But that did not happen. Trent Williams talked in that locker room about the 49ers learning from the lesson of week 6 and making sure that it didn't repeat itself on Sunday. And what was the very first play coming out of the George Kittle Achilles tear? It was a 45-yard dot from Brock Purdy to Juwan Jennings. Go and watch the tape. It's over Zach Bond, the linebacker, in front of the safety. It's one of those throws that I think on the TV copy, you're like, okay, he hit, it looks like a little crosser to Juwan Jennings. Nice pass, but you don't think anything too great of it. If you watch it from the All-22 copy, it's one of those layered throws over the linebacker in front of the safety on perfect time to Juwan Jennings, delivered as an absolute pillow, a catchable pillow to Jennings, that Purdy might be one of 3 or 4 quarterbacks in this league who's consistently making that throw. If that. I mean, so the 49ers immediately responded with a statement that, at least in retrospect, was a very clear statement that they were out there to win the game. And it was such a better response than what this team had in week 6 after Fred Warner went down. And the guy who tied those 2 things together, who made sure that this was a full circle moment for the 49ers, but this time they showed the more positive response, that was Trent Williams. He was the emotional rudder in the huddle. He's been the emotional rudder for this football team throughout the past 5 years in the locker room, with the way that he's able to so eloquently describe where the 49ers are as a football team in the larger context of the sport, in the larger context of the league, in the larger context of their injury situation. Guys like Trent Williams are the reason why the 49ers were able to bounce back so much more effectively from a devastating injury on Sunday than they did back in week 6. So we are watching a team that has blossomed in front of our eyes when it comes to resilience. And so much of this is hard to quantify and hard to kind of describe. But that's why I go in there. That's why I talk to these guys. And that's why I try to bring you the emotion, because I can't tell the story of this 49ers team without getting into the experience, the wisdom that comes from some of these superstar players and some of the A-listers. Now, so Trent Williams toughed it out to play. Ricky Pearsall has now not played for 2 weeks for the 49ers, and he practiced ahead of the game against the Seattle Seahawks in Week 18, but then he didn't end up playing. I am going to be headed down to the facility. The reason that I'm doing this right now from the airport, again, I'm not in jail. The reason I'm doing this right now from the airport, and here on the side, you got the article that I just posted from the plane up on the San Francisco Standard, but 49ers don't have practice today. They're going to be resting today, but they're going to have locker room availability, and Kyle Shanahan's going to speak at noon. And one of the most intriguing pieces of intel that we will get today will be regarding Ricky Pearsall and his status this week. I will continue to maintain that Seattle is a significantly better defense than anybody that the 49ers will face this season. And the 49ers probably do not have a clear path to beating the Seahawks with the type of separation that they were getting from their pass catching arsenal in Philadelphia on Sunday. It was extremely tough sledding against the Eagles. It required Kyle Shanahan digging far into his bag with a trick play. You saw that, Jawan Jennings to Christian McCaffrey. And in this article, I said that Christian McCaffrey channeled his Willie Mays at the Polo Grounds. Like he was in center field and he made the catch dealing with the wind. The wind was moving that football, but it was over his head as he was sprinting forward. I still don't know how Christian McCaffrey made that look as routine as it did, but most running backs would be put in an absolute blender by a catch of that degree of difficulty. But anyway, the 49ers needed a Hall of Fame play like that. They had to really pull a rabbit out of their hat in order to make the math work against the Eagles. I think it's going to be a lot harder to make the math work against a better Seattle defense, which the 49ers already just saw last week in Week 18. They tried a trick play against the Seahawks, similar type of thing, pitch back, but the Seahawks stayed at home. Unlike the Eagles, the Seahawks stayed at home, and the 49ers had to go underneath the Christian McCaffrey for 5 yards. So without Ricky Pearsall in both of the last two games, the 49ers have run into a similar problem of the math doesn't work, the geometry downfield, there's not enough space. And in both games, Kyle Shanahan has found the need to go to a trick play, but only against Philadelphia did that trick play work to change the math of the game. So will Ricky be available? Will he not be available? Because he quite literally was the difference back in Week 1 when the 49ers did beat the Seahawks. There's a silver lining for this George Kittle injury. Like if there's one way, like when you're analyzing this matchup against the Seahawks, if there's one small silver lining, it is that the 49ers were able to beat the Seahawks in Week 1 while missing George Kittle for most of that game. But they weren't missing Ricky Pearsall, and he bookended that game with massive catches early on and then late. And the late one is what tipped the scales. While the 49ers were trailing 13-10, Ricky Pearsall beat Reek Woolen down the sideline. Looked like Reek Woolen lost the football, but Pearsall wanted the go route, created the separation that San Francisco needed, and they ended up driving down the field. And Jake Tonjes, who replaced George Kittle, caught the ball that was like the Dwight Clark catch in the end zone. So, a lot has changed as far as the 49ers defense since then. The Seahawks have remained generally healthy over the course of the years, so we know what they're bringing to the table. I know that the 49ers equation has taken all these weird twists and turns given all the injuries this year. But I think at a fundamental level, when you're playing an elite defense, you just need a certain level of separation that the 49ers were counting on Brandon Ayuk to generate. When Ayuk defected from the team, they definitely were counting on Ricky Pearsall to generate that space making in the perimeter of the field. If you don't have either of those guys, and now you don't have Kittle on top of that, it is very, very hard to see a clear path to victory, especially since it's so important to emphasize that Trent Williams is not playing at 100%. Look, I have the graphic of the pressures allowed by the 49ers in this game against the Philadelphia Eagles. And you see Williams was 6. Now, I'm including context. I'm saying it was a heroic performance, but it's clear that Trent is not at 100%. He doesn't give up 6 pressures when he's healthy. It just doesn't happen. Spencer Burford with 4, and I think that's connected to Trent Williams because he's on the left side. So Trent Williams, especially when he's healthy, can help mask some of the 49ers' issues at that left guard position. Dominic Pooney with 3 on the right side, Jake Brendel with 2, and Colton McKivitz had a good game. Only 1 pressure allowed against the Philadelphia Eagles. The Seahawks are going to bring numerous veterans who I think have more veteran guile than the pass rushers of the Philadelphia Eagles, who are younger, right? You've got Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Jalix Hunt, the really interesting prospect who beat Trent Williams a couple times in this game. He's a former safety, so he came in. He has a lot of speed to power. The Seahawks, they have the seasoned veterans up front. They've got your Leonard Williams type, right? They have DeMarcus Lawrence, who beat Colton McKivitz on that 4th down that really turned the game very heavily in the Seattle Seahawks' favor back in week 18. Now, these are guys who aren't going to be easily fooled by some of the misdirection stuff that Kyle Shanahan is going to run. And these are guys who definitely physically will test where Trent Williams is at. And this is another area where the short week for the 49ers is really, really daunting. San Francisco is going to have 5 days in between games. The Seahawks have 13 days in between games. The last time they played was against San Francisco back on that Saturday, that week 18 game. I will talk to Trent in the locker room today, hopefully, if he's there. And it's going to be interesting to hear how his hamstring fared in the aftermath of this game against Philadelphia, because he did take that risk to play. He was very happy after the game. I told you about all the emotion after the game. I told you about the thrill of victory for the 49ers, the appreciation of resilience in that locker room. Trent was at the center of that. He gave some of the best quotes about what the 49ers had accomplished. So everything seemed fine then. Now, the next step on the checklist is, does everything seem fine 48 hours after the football game? How's the treatment going for Trent Williams to make sure that the hamstring is potentially even in a better position, given a few more days of recovery entering Saturday night against Seattle and their ferocious defensive front? The 49ers are not practicing today. Just gives you an idea of how intense this turnaround is for San Francisco with only 5 days in between games. They played 3 games in 13 days prior to this stretch. 3 short weeks and 4 games for the 49ers. I mean, it's been wild. Whereas the Seahawks, because they're in that number 1 seed with the win at Levi's, are coming at this from a completely opposite direction. So the Seahawks will get a full week of practice in. The 49ers most certainly won't. They're not going to practice today. They're going to get back on that field tomorrow, because you do have to go through some of the practice routine stuff at least one time in the week. And then they'll be more at walkthrough speed on Thursday before they head on up to Seattle on Friday, probably midday Friday, for the flight up to the Pacific Northwest for the 49ers. The good news for San Francisco, another silver lining here, is since you just game planned for the Seahawks, you probably don't need as many live reps over the course of the week as you normally would. It's been the tremendously unusual situation of playing Seattle in early September, not seeing them for 4 months. So it was week 1 to the very last week of the regular season, week 18. But now you're playing them twice in 3 weeks. The Seahawks are literally playing 8 straight quarters against the 49ers. So San Francisco gets a little bit of a mulligan, if you will, from week 18 because they beat Philadelphia. The 49ers go from trailing by 10, right? Losing the game in week 18, 13-3, to getting to hit the reset button, and it's going to be 0-0 on Saturday. But they did sandwich a very physical, hard-fought battle against the defending Super Bowl champions all the way back on the East Coast in between those two games. So even though the scoreboard will be 0-0 to begin Saturday, there's going to be a lot to overcome. The 49ers are definitely taking the steepest path up Mount Everest this season. You know, Mike sent me a clip that I like defined the 49ers off season, and I think it's worth bringing the clip back right now, because it's this type of unbridled enthusiasm that the 49ers are really going to need to tap into to be ready for what appears to be a nearly impossible challenge ahead. Teams with this kind of rest disadvantage entering a playoff game since 1984 are 0-7. Teams with only 5 days in between games versus a team with at least 13 days in between games. That is where the Seattle Seahawks are at. So the math, the numbers, the predictive numbers do not work in the 49ers formula. You know, I showed Han Solo yesterday from Empire Strikes Back. Never tell me the odds. Well, that's the kind of mentality the 49ers are going to have to carry entering this game. They're going to have to say, never tell me the odds. They're going to have this Jim Harbaugh-like enthusiasm unknown to mankind. And it just so happens that one of their rookie players is really burgeoning into a star right now. His name is Upton Stout. I think it's a fitting time to go back to the draft call from John Lynch and company to Upton Stout after the 49ers selected him in the 3rd round out of Western Kentucky.
Upton, it's John Lynch from the Niners, man. How you doing?
Man, let's do it,
Let's
Coach.
do it. I didn't even have to ask you or tell you.
Let's do it, Coach.
We're ready to do it, man.
Let's do it, Coach. Come on, Coach.
I love it.
Let's do it.
I love it. I'm going to put you on with Coach. Here's
Come
Coach
on,
Shanahan,
Coach.
man.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Let's do it, Coach. I'm telling you,
Upton,
let's
what's up,
do it,
man?
Coach. You
You
don't
ready?
know what you just got, Coach. You just got a dog.
Oh, we know that, man. All we got to do is see this tape. We know we got a dog,
You just
man.
got a dog, Coach. I promise you just got a dog, Coach.
Dude, that fires me up, man. We've been waiting all
Man,
day.
let's
We
do it,
feel
Coach.
fortunate to
That's what
get
I
you,
wanna
man.
be, Coach. Come on.
Dude, that's what I'm talking about, man. Congratulations. Enjoy this night, man. We
Thank you,
can't wait to
Coach.
get you out
Yes,
here,
sir.
dude.
Yes,
You just
sir.
fired me up
Appreciate
even more, man.
it. Come on, Coach.
All
Let's
right,
do it.
man. Here's our owner, Jed
Come
York,
on.
dude. Congrats, man.
Yes, sir.
Upton, congratulations, man.
Man, appreciate it, Coach. Thank God. Appreciate you, Coach.
We know we got a dog. We're ready to
Come
see you,
on, now.
man.
You know it, Coach. You know you got a dog. You got the best DBs.
I know. We got it, man. We're fired up. Everybody in here's fired up. Can't wait to get you out here soon, man.
Let's do it on 3.
do it,
1,
Coach.
2,
I'm
3.
excited.
Let's do it. All right. We'll have the coaches call you later on, Upton. You have fun tonight with your family.
Yes, sir.
Let's do it, man.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Good stuff. Really good stuff. Doesn't that hit a little bit different? It hits a little bit harder now that the 49ers are 13-5 heading to the divisional round, 3rd game against Seattle. There are so many ways that I could parse this, but I still remember Upton Stout's first career game was at Seattle week 1. And he was definitely the weak link of the 49ers defense. That's back before the injuries, right? They had Bosa, they had Warner, they had Trent Williams. And it was Upton Stout who Seattle picked on. He had a holding call in that 4th down where the throw went from Sam Darnold to Cooper Kupp, and it extended the Seahawks drive and allowed them to punch it in for a touchdown. And it was a time where everybody realized, okay, Upton Stout, that they're going to be rookie learning moments. He's got a lot of fire to him. He's got a lot of enthusiasm to him, but there are going to be some rough patches early on. Fast forward to now, and I think you could make the legitimate argument that Upton Stout is the best defender on the field for the 49ers. Now, Deommodore Lenoir probably would have something to say about that. They play different DB positions. Upton is a nickelback who's going to be working against the run more often. Deommodore Lenoir is going to be covering outside wide receivers more often. But Upton has, I think, popped more off tape than any other 49ers defender in recent weeks. And we are seeing his exact profile, like what we had scouted coming out of Western Kentucky, show up on the field. This guy had more bench press reps than any other defensive back at the 2025 NFL Combine, any other cornerback at the 2025 Combine, despite the fact that he's only 5'8". So the size was the knock on Upton Stout. The lack of size is why he wasn't the first or second round pick. He fell to the third round because he's not a big guy, but he's extremely strong. And I think that Upton, he plays with a chip on his shoulder because people have underestimated him because of his size, but he actually uses that smaller frame as a positive because he's more agile. He's able to sneak his way around blockers, and then he uses the muscle. Then he uses the fact that he did put up the 22, 23, whatever it was, bench press reps. He really can bring the power, like really concentrated power, to tackling, to run defense. And it's been massive for the 49ers. Everything is bound together. I'm going to bring this all full circle because I know that I was talking about the 49ers veterans to start this show. I think that the enthusiasm that you heard from Upton Stout, it's like this underdog's enthusiasm, the dog in him. I think that has energized 49ers veterans this year. That type of mentality. They've looked for guys like that to infuse the roster with youth. Now, when you get into the true, I can't say the doldrums because it's not boring, but you get into the, I can't say dog days because those are in August, but you get into the really, really tough times of the marathon. You're mile 23, mile 24 of the marathon right now, right? If you're the 49ers, it is painful. Everyone is probably laboring through something. Trent Williams is very openly laboring through a hamstring issue. I talked to Keon White in the locker room, and we all know that he's laboring through a hamstring and a groin issue. And he just sucked it up and played 41 snaps for the 49ers and delivered big time. Some pressures in very, very key moments for San Francisco against Philadelphia. But when everyone is straining and they're being asked to carry an even heavier load than they were expected to carry because of the inordinate amount of injuries, where does a team turn for its energy? Yeah, you could turn to your veteran experience and realize you may not have all too many of these opportunities. That's where Kyle Juszczyk's speech about cherishing the moment in the locker room comes from. But I think that you need some actual outside energy injected into the team that serves you in situations like this. And that's Upton Stout. That draft pick, let's do it, coach. He's calling Jed York, the owner, coach. I think that has energized Trent Williams and company. Meanwhile, the example that Trent Williams and company have set as far as playing through injuries, toughing things out, maintaining an even keel, that has taught Upton Stout how to be the best professional football player possible. It's a symbiotic relationship. The rookies like Stout have energized the veterans, and the veterans like Trent Williams have informed and taught the rookies. And that is what a healthy team ecosystem looks like. I want to delve deep into this because I think that this is such an awesome, unique case study, what the 49ers have been able to bring to the table here in 2025. We haven't seen this in NFL history before. We haven't seen a team overcome as much as San Francisco has to reach the level that they've had. And because of that, I like to look at the people in the building. This is a special collection of individuals to be able to achieve what they've achieved. So to me, it's fascinating to see the dynamics on that roster that have made this possible for the 49ers. Again, I am not in a jail cell. I am in the United Club at San Francisco. I just landed. Practice is coming up in about 2 hours, so I'm not going back up to the city. I have to head straight down to Santa Clara. It technically is not practice today, though. It is just media availability because the 49ers need to rest their weary bodies because they got the short end of the stick scheduling-wise, so they are not going to practice until tomorrow. Today is treatment day for the 49ers, but they did open things up, or they will open things up to the media. I have the final tallies of the game against Philadelphia when it came to expected points. I do this every week. I'll get this up on the screen for you guys. Here we go. Offense led the way for San Francisco, plus 8.6 expected points. Defense was slightly above average. That's a hell of a performance for a beaten up defense, plus 0.6. This was the 49ers' worst special teams performance since week 1 when Jake Moody was still on the team. Coincidentally, that happened against Seattle, minus 5.3 points on special teams. 49ers were at minus 10 or minus 11 in week 1. Then they cut Moody, they moved to Eddie Pinheiro, and ever since then, they've been the best special teams unit in football. Why were they minus 5.3? They struggled punting into the wind. Remember, Thomas Morstead didn't have a great punt into the wind. Sky Moore tried to field one inside the 5-yard line again on a fair catch. That is not advised. They did miss an extra point, but so did the Eagles, so that evened out. But either way, it is remarkable that the 49ers won this game by 4 points as 5.5-point underdogs, but they won this game by 4 points despite losing 5.3 expected points on special teams. Just goes to show you how special that performance was by Brock Purdy with a shorthanded offense to gain 8.6 expected points. It goes to show you how special it was for the defense to essentially hold serve against the most expensive offense in NFL history at plus 0.6. And all of this adds up to about plus 4, right? About plus 3.6, plus 3.7. And the 49ers won by 4 points, 23-19. So now you have to apply the formula to this game against Seattle. How much of this defensive performance can you replicate if you're the 49ers? The Seahawks are not great offensively. And then how much of this offensive performance can you replicate? That's going to be the more marquee question. The 49ers were like in the negative double digits offensively when they played Seattle just over a week ago. They played much better against the Eagles. But how much of that was the 49ers? How much of that was the fact that they just weren't playing the Seahawks, who have established themselves as the very, very best defense in football? I'll show you guys the defensive breakdown here. I got to get the team tier chart up, and we're going to look specifically at defense. And this is going to illustrate just how different Seattle is from the rest of the league. You can't just categorize the top defenses into a clump and say that it's the same thing facing all these guys. The Seahawks deserve more respect. Here you go. So this is just defense. Remember that passing defense is on the x-axis. So the further to the right a team is, the better the pass defense is. And the further up a team is on the vertical axis, the better the run defense is. So you want to be further to the right and further up. You've got a lot of the good defenses clustered right here, right? We saw the Texans last night completely shut down the Steelers. We've seen Jacksonville this year. They were really good defensively. The Browns were good as well, also in the upper right. The Rams, we know, are good. The Broncos, and here are the Eagles, whom the 49ers just played. Solid defense, right? Well, where are the Seahawks? They're right here. The Seahawks have a significantly better run defense than anyone in the league. Now, the one good news piece of silver lining here for the 49ers is they did not run effectively against the Eagles, who are worse, but they didn't run effectively, and they still were able to win the game with Brock Purdy's arm. So assuming that the run threat is snuffed out in a similar way, you could say, well, Seattle's a little bit better in pass defense, but you could kind of cross out the run defense advantage since the 49ers weren't able to run the ball anyway in Philadelphia. That would be one piece of silver lining, but I think that we've got a case-by-case study already of Week 18 versus the wild card round where the 49ers got to play Seattle. So we got a case-by-case study of the past two defenses that the 49ers have faced, and one of the next defense they'll face because it's a rematch with the Seahawks. And I think it's clear to say that the Seahawks are a level above the defending world champion Philadelphia Eagles. There's a reason why the 49ers are like 7.5-point underdogs in this game against Seattle. And it's because A, they're on the road, B, they've got a big rest disadvantage, but C, the Seahawks are just playing better, more experienced, scarier than the Eagles on defense. Mike McDonald has built a monster up there in the Pacific Northwest. The 49ers, though, have found a way to beat the Seahawks already this year. And I get it. It was a different roster situation, but 17 points got it done in week 1, and it was Brock Purdy magic. It was Jake Tonjes magic, Ricky Pearsall magic. So we have to, that's going to be a massive, massive variable to track over the course of this week. And B, the changing variables have not all worked against the 49ers this year. Yes, they've lost a lot of guys injury-wise since week 1, but since week 18, there have been some changing variables that tend to favor the 49ers, such as the fact that they're going to have 4 or 5 surging rookies playing on defense in this game, a handful of whom did not play extensively on defense in week 18 against Seattle. So a lot changed when Jair Brown, who's a slower safety, hurt his hamstring against Philadelphia. Marquise Siegel, who hadn't played since week 7 against the Atlanta Falcons, Marquise Siegel came in for San Francisco and was awesome. And this is another great example of, I think, the veteran pillars shepherding along the young players. It would have been very, very easy for Marquise Siegel to pack it in for 2026 after the 49ers benched him following week 7. Instead, I think that he saw the example of how Christian McCaffrey works, how Trent Williams works, how Deommodore Lenoir works. I mean, name your veteran A-list pillar. I think that Marquise Siegel was able to see those guys. I think Marquise Siegel's built of the right stuff. And I think that he put his head down and he worked behind the scenes, even when no one was looking over the course of the past 3 months, to the point where Jair Brown got hurt. And the Marquise Siegel that we saw enter the game against Philadelphia was a different player, a much more confident player than the one that we saw get benched 3 months ago. And immediately the 49ers have a massive speed upgrade at safety, because Jair Brown is running a 4.6 or a 4.7 and Siegel's running a 4.3 or a 4.4 with the best broad jump in the entire 2025 DB class. So immediately the 49ers are going to have an athleticism upgrade at safety. That's massive when it comes to defending the perimeter run, especially if your defensive line is not strong. And the 49ers don't have a great defensive line this year, especially if there are some questions about the linebacker crew. And obviously the 49ers have dealt with a lot of those this year with them being down to their 4th string middle linebacker in Eric Kendricks. But that represents another big change from the last time they played Seattle. It is unusual to see this many things change on a defense or on any unit in 2 weeks between 2 matchups. Normally teams don't play twice in this short of a stretch of time. So normally you don't see this many changes, and you don't see teams play twice. For the Seahawks, again, it is 8 straight quarters against the 49ers. But Eric Kendricks has been ultimate addition by subtraction in the linebacker room. He is a player. And funny enough, I think the video that I've put up this year that has done the most views out of any of my videos, it's well over 100,000 views, comes from November when the 49ers signed Kendricks to the practice squad. And I made the point in that video saying the 49ers have signed a former All-Pro to their team. Eric Kendricks was a first-team All-Pro for Minnesota working under Mike Zimmer in 2019. Kyle Shanahan has talked about going against Eric Kendricks on the silent tape for years. There is a respect for this guy's game because of how he's been, especially been able to identify what opposing offenses are doing. I mean, the brain is there for Eric Kendricks. The football brain is there. And Kyle Shanahan, game recognized game. He has schemed against Eric Kendricks for years. He wanted him in 2024. They finally get him on November 26th. We make a video out from the farm in Tennessee. I just flew in from Nashville. I made a pit stop there coming through from Philadelphia. That video exploded because I think people sensed that the 49ers needed a veteran linebacker presence to finish bridging the gap back to Fred Warner. There were already rumblings that Warner might make it back for late in the playoffs at that time, but there still was a clear need for San Francisco to bolster that linebacker position, especially if more injuries were coming, and more injuries were indeed coming. Tatum Bethune and D. Winters both got hurt. So they brought Kendricks in, and in one of the greatest developments of this 49ers past 6 weeks, it's a storybook development. He spent extra time with KJ Wright, who is a former Seahawk, the assistant linebackers coach, learning the playbook. And KJ got him up to speed. Then the Bethune and Winters injuries happened. And then Kendrick started for the first time last week against Philadelphia. And I have watched every single snap twice on tape of this game at this point. I'm not sure Kendricks was out of position once. He was awesome. It was an immediate hidden upgrade, but not so hidden. Again, we made a video about this in November when the 49ers first signed into the practice squad. We said, former All-Pro joins. This could be huge for the 49ers, and it has paid every single dividend imaginable. Maybe the more shocking positive piece for the 49ers is how well Garrett Wallow played. He led the team with 11 tackles. Now, Wallow, unlike Kendricks, doesn't have a whole lot of linebacker experience. So Wallow was just kind of a wild card. And the one rep that replayed after the first Seahawks game in Week 18, it came after Winters got hurt. So Wallow came into the game, and he wasn't able to really disengage a block on the 3rd and 17 that Kenneth Walker picked up. So I think everybody thought that Wallow was trash just based on that one play, but they never really gave him a shot, especially a shot starting a game where he would actually be taking reps throughout the course of the week against the scout team looks of the opposing team. So everybody wrote Wallow off. Even I was like, okay, well, Kaiser White's actually been there and done that, so maybe Kaiser White's going to be that guy. But Wallow impressed the 49ers so much in the week of practice ahead of Philadelphia that he earned the starting spot, and he led the team with 11 tackles. Robert Saleh has long been a linebacker whisperer. He's a former linebackers coach under Gus Bradley with Jacksonville. Johnny Holland is one of the best linebackers coaches in the game. Look at the way that the 49ers have developed Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Azeez Al-Shire. I mean, the list goes on, and now they're moving on to the next crop of linebackers, but they have a track record of producing really good linebacker talent. KJ Wright is now a hidden member, like a hidden weapon on the coaching staff. He's only 36. KJ is a playing contemporary of Eric Kendricks, who was 33. They were two of the better linebackers in the game simultaneously. And KJ used to play for the Seahawks and the Legion of Boom. So I find it extremely fitting that you've got Eric Kendricks learning over the past 6 weeks for this big moment under KJ Wright, spending that extra time in KJ Wright's office before KJ Wright makes the homecoming to Seattle. I'm all for full circle stuff. It's the kind of stuff that I eat up when I'm trying to cover these football games, and I think that is just a classic of a classic. KJ Wright tutoring Eric Kendricks before the 49ers head to Seattle. You guys know that I love a good full circle story, and I think that's definitely one of them. Let's see if we could hear from Eric Kendricks himself.
KJ Wright,
Yeah, here it is.
KJ Wright, I've been in kind of just knocking on his meeting door, getting extra time with him since I got here. So, whether it's super early in the morning or after meetings, I feel like he's got me prepared. We went through a bunch of situations, watched a bunch of film together. He's got stamina as a coach. So, obviously we know what kind of player he was. But, it's been nice to, bounce my old playbook off him and kind of compare it to this new one and get the similarities and the differences, because that's kind of like, this is my, I think, 4th defense in a row. So it's like, you have to be able to compare and contrast and, just get rid of the stuff that doesn't matter and kind of lock in on the new concepts. So I feel like we got a pretty good grasp of that pretty early.
Isn't that an amazing answer? There are so many of these stories that are blossoming in the 49ers locker room. I know that I brought up Upton Stout today. Anybody who's interested, do you guys want me to repurpose the offseason video that I did? And I traveled to Western Kentucky this offseason, and I talked to Upton Stout's head coach, in college, Tyson Helton. We sat down and I was able to tour the locker room there. I was able to see everything. And I did this like big in-depth piece on Upton Stout. And it came out, and 2 hours later, Brock Purdy signed his contract. So I don't think that everybody saw that. I think that we got like 30,000 views on it. But I think that especially now that Stout, this is one of the best stories in his locker room full of epic stories. Would you guys like me to repurpose that and drop it again so you could learn about Upton Stout? I mean, if you give me a thumbs up if you want to see that again, or if you want me to make a newer version of it, because I think that it's something that's really, really relevant right now. So let me know about that. But there are so many stories in this 49ers locker room that are coexisting and congealing to form this run. And, I go back to the game story that I wrote from Philadelphia. I flew back here to the West Coast, made it to my jail cell at the SFO airport. But there's a reason why the 49ers feel this almost eerie sense of calm, and they felt it on the last drive of the win against the Eagles, even as their defense was bleeding some yardage. And even though it seemed that victory was uncertain at the time, and it's because they have absolutely maximized this 2025 season, regardless of what happens moving forward. And yeah, I get it. They're not likely to win in Seattle, but they're going to fight like hell. And there's a real chance that they do win there, just because the pedigree that they've already established this year fighting through this kind of adversity. They were 8.5-point underdogs in LA. They're bigger underdogs in LA in week 5 with a skeleton crew, and they won. So, I mean, they've earned the seat at this table, but they've also maximized this reset, injury-riddled year in a way that is so unprecedented that they are now the most dangerous type of opponent, an opponent with nothing to lose. And that is the type of opponent that could probably stand the biggest chance of shocking a quarterback like Sam Darnold, of coaxing a mistake or two from Sam Darnold, of creating a greasy win. And I just posted this up on social media. And I think that we have to go back to 49ers history, and we don't have to go back all that far to look at precedent for this game. This is the snow globe game. The last time that the 49ers faced a team in this kind of shorter rest scenario was in the 2021 season, when they had beaten the Cowboys in the wild card rounds. The Cowboys were that year's version of the Philadelphia Eagles. They'd vanquished them on the road. And then San Francisco went into Green Bay, where the Packers, like the Seahawks this year, were the number 1 seed. The 49ers were beaten up. They were short on rest. They were 5.5 to 6-point underdogs. They're 7 to 7.5-point underdogs against the Seahawks this week. How did the 49ers end up getting that done? Well, the big answer was special teams. As I wrote here, they posted a staggering +9 expected points. They won the game 13-10, but they posted +9 expected points on special teams. So 9 points in the game where there are only 23 combined points between both teams. Yeah, that's a massive swing. There were 2 blocks in that game, one of a field goal and one of a punt. That one turned into a Talanoa Hufanga touchdown. And both blocks were registered by Jordan Willis. Robbie Gould obviously made the clutch kick at the end of the game, and you could see the celebration on the photo there to send the 49ers over the Packers. But that was the epitome of a greasy win. I talk about the math in these games because I'm saying, okay, this is how the 49ers can win on a clear path. Like, if there are no turnovers or if stuff doesn't get weird, are the 49ers strong enough to win a game? They might not be strong enough to win this game on a clear path, especially if Ricky Pearsall doesn't play. And that's what I'm going to report on in a little bit. But they weren't strong enough to win on a clear path against number 1 Green Bay in 2021, and they still did get that victory. And it's because they found a greasy way to get it done. And what they did is they dragged the Packers into deep water. That's where sharks hunt, in deep water, right? And once the Packers were in deep water, I thought the 49ers had them dead to rights in that game, because they were a team that had clutched up throughout the course of that 2021 stretch run to the point where they had this belief that they had been to hell and back. They had this belief that they would prevail at the crunch time moments that typically produce chokers, typically produce situations where players wilt and coaches wilt under pressure. The 49ers believed that they wouldn't wilt under pressure, and that belief turned into reality. They manifested it. Something similar is happening here in 2025, where the 49ers are not losing when games reach crunch time. The Seahawks did a really good job in week 18 of preventing the game from reaching crunch time. They notched the interception after Christian McCaffrey made the uncharacteristic drop that the game probably would have reached crunch time had McCaffrey made that catch. So the 49ers' goal this week, this is all about getting the Seahawks to deep water this time. You're not better than the Seahawks. Nobody's pretending that they're better than the Seahawks, but you think you can beat them in a one-off scenario. And the 49ers wanted another chance because what they didn't do back in week 18, they didn't take the Seahawks to deep water. They didn't put Sam Darnold in a true pressure situation of, okay, Sam, what do you have now? You have a history of throwing terrible passes and picks when the lights are brightest in these playoff situations with all the money down. They didn't take Sam Darnold to a spot where he would actually have to prove that he wasn't going to do that again, because the Seahawks commanded that game from start to finish. The 49ers never took them to deep water. 4 years ago, they took the Packers to deep water. They ended up winning. They had the DNA to prevail in that type of game. Can they do that again here in January of 2026 against the Seattle Seahawks? That's the very big question. Anyway, the grades from 49ers Eagles are up on the San Francisco Standard. You could support the channel by going and checking out the link that I'm about to put into the comment section. I'll pin it right there. So check it out. DeMarcus Robinson. It was the DeMarcus Robinson game. 6 catches, 111 yards. Check out the grades. I'm about to head to the locker room. Have to drive down 101 to make it. We have about 2 hours before Kyle Shanahan speaks, and we're at 98,536 subs. So hit that sub button. We are getting to 100,000 real subscribers before any other 49ers channel. It's going to happen. Hit that button to support. Look, I landed SFO. This is dedication. And I sit down in what looks like a jail cell to bring you guys a nice live. So anyway, let's do it. Be Upton Stout. Hit that like button. We'll talk to you very, very soon.